In December 1989, a nude female body was found in the desolate desert of Mojave County, Arizona. For decades, she was known only as Jane Doe, her true name lost to time and sand. On December 12, 1989, a nude female body was discovered in the remote desert area of Mojave County. The investigators determined that the woman's life had likely been ended at the scene, the surrounding evidence suggesting no sign of transportation or dumping. The case immediately presented difficulties. There were no personal belongings, no identification, and no clear trail leading back to who she was. Despite the early efforts of law enforcement, the victim's identity remained a mystery, and she was recorded simply as an unidentified Jane Doe. For decades, the investigators tried to uncover her name. They ran her fingerprints and dental records, compared her description with missing persons reports, and followed every potential lead, but nothing led to a match. The technology of the time offered little help, and the case gradually faded into the background of unsolved files. Yet the woman in the desert was not forgotten. Her file remained open, waiting for a connection that might one day bring her story to light. That breakthrough finally came in February 2022. As part of renewed efforts to identify long unidentified remains, the investigators resubmitted her fingerprints to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System database. This time, with modern systems and expanded data, the search yielded a result. The prints matched a woman listed under the name Maria Ortiz from Bakersfield, California. For the first time in more than 3 decades, the unknown woman had a potential name attached to her. The authorities discovered that Maria's fingerprints had been entered into the system back in 1989, following an arrest for shoplifting by the Kern County Sheriff's Office. The record included a residential address that she reportedly shared with 2 friends. The investigators from the Mojave County Sheriff's Office reached out to one of those friends to gather more information about the woman they believed was Maria Ortiz. But the friend's response added an unexpected twist to the story. The woman explained that she did not know anyone by the name Maria Ortiz. However, she did have a cousin named Marina Ramos who had lived with her for a time and had gone missing in 1989. That revelation immediately drew the investigators' attention. The physical description of Marina Ramos matched the unidentified woman found in the desert decades earlier, suggesting that Maria Ortiz was not a real identity, but an alias. The discovery reshaped the case entirely. The Jane Doe from Mojave County was not Maria Ortiz. She was Marina Ramos, the young mother who had disappeared years earlier. As the investigators confirmed this link, they uncovered one more haunting detail. Marina had last been seen with her 2 daughters, 14-month-old Elizabeth and 2-month-old Jasmine. In 2023, the Mojave County Sheriff's Office renewed its efforts to locate Marina's missing daughters, using social media to share information about the decades-old case. Around the same time, members of Marina's family agreed to provide DNA samples, which were submitted both to CODIS, the National Law Enforcement DNA Database, and to several commercial genetic testing services. Their goal was to trace any living relatives who might be connected to the missing children and to bring closure to a story that had remained unresolved for more than 30 years. The long-awaited breakthrough came in August 2025. The investigators announced that they had found a woman whose DNA showed a high match to a member of the Ramos family. Working alongside a genetic genealogist, the authorities were able to locate both of Marina's daughters. The 2 women voluntarily provided DNA samples, which confirmed beyond any doubt that they were indeed the missing children, Elizabeth and Jasmine Ramos. What followed next finally revealed what had happened to them after their mother's tragic demise. Law enforcement learned that just 2 days after Marina's body was discovered in the Arizona desert, her daughters were found abandoned inside a public restroom at a park in Oxnard, California. A witness reported hearing the sound of crying and entered the restroom to find the 2 babies lying on the wet floor unattended and frightened. The incident had been covered briefly in local news at the time, but no connection was made between the abandoned infants and the unidentified woman found in Arizona. The children were turned over to Child Protective Services and later placed in foster care. Eventually, both girls were adopted by a couple from Ventura County and raised under new names. Jasmine, who now goes by Tina, grew up and settled in Oregon, while Elizabeth, known as Melissa, made her home in Arizona. Despite being separated from their biological family and from the truth of their past for decades, both sisters were finally reunited with their identities through the persistence of investigators and advancements in DNA technology. With their identities confirmed, the Mojave County Sheriff's Office announced that one crucial part of the 36-year-old mystery had been solved. However, the focus of the investigation has turned to finding Marina's perpetrator. The authorities also shared that a witness from 1989 had reported seeing a woman and 2 men with the children at the Oxnard Park around the time the girls were abandoned. The group was seen near a black Mini pickup truck. The woman was described as Hispanic, wearing a long red skirt and white boots, while the two men were also described as Hispanic. The investigators continue to pursue leads based on these descriptions, urging anyone with information, particularly about the pickup truck or the individual seen that day, to come forward. In July 2004, a passerby walking through the Meijendel Dunes near Wassenaar, Netherlands, made a disturbing discovery of human remains. For years, the investigators struggled to uncover who she was or how she ended up in the dunes. On the morning of July 4, 2004, a person walking discovered a human body lying partly concealed by sand and brush. The sight was disturbing enough for the witness to immediately alert the Wassenaar police. Within minutes, the officers arrived at the scene, securing and cordoning off the area to preserve any potential evidence. Paramedics were also called to assess the situation, but there was nothing they could do. The woman was confirmed deceased, and early observations suggested that the body had been there for quite some time. The position of the remains and the condition of the surroundings hinted that nature had already begun to reclaim what was left. What had once been a person's life now lay silent in the dunes, waiting for answers. From the very beginning, the investigators faced a difficult challenge. The woman carried no identification, no wallet, no papers, and no personal belongings that could reveal who she was. The lack of information made it nearly impossible to determine her identity. The police began a careful search of the area, hoping to uncover even the smallest clue that could point to where she had come from or why she had ended up there. The discovery of her clothing added another layer of mystery. She was dressed in items that seemed unusual for a beach or dune environment. Red shiny patent leather shoes and several layers of clothing that did not match the season or setting. Among her possessions, the police found a keychain containing several keys manufactured by a German brand. One of the keys was later traced to the German city of Batra, but despite this promising lead, no precise address could be linked to it. When the results of the initial examination came back, the investigators found themselves no closer to understanding what had happened. There were no clear signs of a violent struggle on the body, and the cause of demise could not be determined with certainty. Toxicology and forensic reports offered no definitive answers, leaving the authorities with more questions than solutions. As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. On October 10, 2025, the authorities made a long-awaited announcement that finally brought a name to the unidentified woman found in the dunes more than 2 decades earlier. After years of silence and uncertainty, the victim was identified as Eva Maria Palmer, a German citizen who had been 35 years old at the time of her end. The revelation marked a significant breakthrough in a case that had haunted both Dutch and German investigators for years. The identification became possible after a crucial piece of information, a golden tip, was submitted to the authorities. This new lead aligned with previous clues that had consistently pointed toward Germany, especially the city of Batra. Using this fresh direction, the investigators compared available records and conducted DNA testing, which conclusively confirmed the woman's identity as Eva. From the very beginning of the investigation, there had been strong indications that the victim originated from Germany. Her clothing was identified as brands primarily sold in the country. These details had always hinted at her German background, but without a confirmed name, her story had remained incomplete. Despite this major development, the identification did not answer the deeper questions surrounding Eva's end. The authorities still do not know how or why she ended up in the dunes of Wassenaar, nor have they been able to determine what caused her life to end. The original post-mortem examination had revealed no clear signs of violence, yet criminal involvement has never been ruled out. The mystery of what truly happened to Eva remains open. With her identity established, Dutch and German police are renewing their efforts to uncover the final steps of her life. The investigators are working together to trace her movements in the weeks and months before she passed, hoping that new information might finally close the gap between her disappearance and her tragic discovery. Their focus is on retracing her last known locations and interactions. The authorities have issued a public appeal, urging anyone who might remember Eva Maria Palmer to come forward. They ask the public to think back to the summer of 2004 and recall whether she may have stayed in a hotel, a recreation park, or made contact with anyone in the region. Even the smallest piece of information could be crucial. After 21 years of uncertainty, the hope is that someone somewhere remembers Eva, and that memory could be the key to understanding how she met her end in the quiet dunes of Wassenaar. Yanni Canal, commissioner of the Dutch National Police, said, "In combination with perseverance of Dutch and German detectives, yet another woman has been given a name. Our thoughts are with all the families who have finally received answers about their loved ones, and with the families who are still waiting for these answers." In August 1986, a 20-year-old college student and young mother vanished after attending her morning classes at Tennessee State University. DNA testing would bring a breakthrough decades later. In February 2004, a skull was discovered by a contractor building homes on Stokers Lane in North Nashville. The discovery ignited an investigation, bringing the police, medical examiners, and a state anthropologist to the scene for an extensive search. Despite combing through the area, no additional remains were located, leaving the investigators with only fragments of what might have happened. The skull was sent for examination, and the authorities worked tirelessly to determine whom it belonged to. But despite their efforts, the process moved slowly, and the case went cold. On October 8, 2025, a breakthrough finally came. After nearly 39 years of uncertainty, forensic scientists at the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification confirmed that the skull found in 2004 on Stokers Lane belonged to Alice Mae Sullivan. Alice was born on August 3, 1966 in the small town of Gallatin, Tennessee. In 1985, Alice graduated from Gallatin High School. Full of dreams and ambition for her future, she was known among her classmates as a friendly and focused student who believed that education would open doors for her and her young son. After graduation, she set her sights on higher education, determined to build a better life for both of them. Alice soon enrolled at Tennessee State University, where she began majoring in business. To make ends meet, Alice worked part-time while attending classes. Her days were often long and exhausting, filled with lectures, study sessions, and work shifts, but she never complained. On August 28, 1986, the ordinary routine of Alice's life took a devastating turn. That morning, the 20-year-old Tennessee State University student attended her usual class, but failed to pick up her 3-year-old son from his babysitter later that day. Her absence immediately alarmed her family, who knew she was a devoted mother and never missed caring for her child. When Alice did not come home that night, her worried parents reported her missing the following day, setting in motion a search that would grow increasingly desperate as hours turned into days. The investigators quickly began piecing together the events leading up to her disappearance. They learned that Alice had been last seen leaving her apartment in Nashville, Davidson County around 8:00 a.m. that morning. She was reportedly on her way to the Tennessee State University campus, following the same path she took every weekday. According to her schedule, she planned to return home late afternoon, but she never arrived and no one heard from her again. The last confirmed sighting of Alice placed her inside a girlfriend's dormitory room in Hankel Hall around 10:00 a.m. Witnesses said that she had been alone at the time, preparing to leave for her next class. She was scheduled to attend a 100 p.m. lecture that day, but she never made it there. This would be the final trace of her movements before she vanished completely. As the investigation deepened, the police found no sign of Alice's personal belongings. Her pocketbook, backpack, and identification were all missing, offering no leads to her whereabouts. The authorities quickly ruled out the possibility of a voluntary disappearance. Alice was close to her family and deeply committed to her son, with no indication she would abandon her life without reason. Foul play became the leading suspicion in her case. For years, Alice's family held on to hope that answers would eventually emerge. This confirmation decades later brought long-awaited closure to her family, who had spent years clinging to hope and searching for answers. For the first time, they knew what had happened to their beloved daughter and mother. Even though the circumstances surrounding her demise still remained unknown, the police noted that no signs of trauma were visible on the recovered skull, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. The absence of physical evidence of injury complicated efforts to determine how Alice lost her life or what might have led to her disappearance. While the identification provided a crucial piece of the puzzle, it also underscored how much of the case remained unresolved. The detectives renewed their efforts to piece together the final moments of her life, determined to uncover the truth after so many years of silence. The investigators soon revealed that they had identified two individuals of interest connected to the original disappearance. One was Alice's boyfriend at the time, who notably failed to report her missing when she did not arrive to pick up her son. His lack of concern had raised suspicions early in the investigation, but no direct evidence ever tied him to her vanishing. The second person of interest was a maintenance worker at the Town Terrace apartments where Alice lived. He later went on to be convicted of indecently assaulting and ending the life of another woman, a disturbing pattern that led investigators to re-examine his potential involvement in Alice's case. Despite these leads, the police have stated that they still lack the evidence needed to make an arrest. Advances in forensic technology have offered new tools and possibilities, but without additional physical proof or eyewitness testimony, the investigation remains stalled. The authorities continue to review old case files, interview witnesses, and analyze the limited evidence recovered over the years, hoping that new methods or information might one day reveal the full truth. For nearly 4 decades, the case of Alice May Sullivan was classified as an endangered missing person file by the Charlie Project, symbolizing the enduring uncertainty that surrounded her disappearance. In November 1984, a 16-year-old girl left her job in Lynbrook, Long Island, New York, and never made it home. After decades passed, using advanced forensic genealogy, the experts built a DNA profile that led them to the perpetrator. Teresa Fusco was born in 1968 in Lynbrook. At 16 years old, she was a student at East Rockaway High School. Outside of school, Teresa spent time working at the Hot Skates roller rink snack bar in Lynbrook. The rink was a popular hangout spot for local teens, a place filled with laughter, music, and flashing lights. On the night of November 10, 1984, Teresa had finished her shift around 10:30 p.m. It was a typical Saturday evening, and she was expected home not long after closing. When she did not arrive by her usual time, her mother initially believed Teresa might have stopped to spend time with friends, something not unusual for a teenager. However, as the hours passed and there was still no word from her, worry began to set in. By late that night, Teresa's mother started calling her daughter's friends and coworkers, hoping someone might have seen her or given her a ride home. No one had. Every call led to the same answer. Teresa had left the rink, but no one knew where she went afterward. Alarmed and sensing something was terribly wrong, her mother contacted the Lynbrook Police Department to report her daughter missing. It was a call that would mark the beginning of a long and painful investigation. When the police began their inquiry, they learned that Teresa had been seen leaving the Hot Skates roller rink in tears that night. Witnesses later reported that she had been fired from her job shortly before closing, a development that may have left her emotionally distraught. The investigators started to piece together the final moments that she was seen, but in those early hours, they treated the case as a possible runaway situation, a common assumption for teenagers who went missing during that era. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Teresa. Then, about a month later, the search came to a devastating end. Her naked body was discovered in a wooded area only a few blocks from the roller rink, buried beneath a layer of leaves. The medical examiner's report revealed the horrifying truth. Teresa had been indecently assaulted and strangled with a ligature. What had once been a missing persons case had turned into a slaying investigation that shocked the community of Lynbrook. 2 years later in 1986, 3 men were arrested, tried, and convicted for ending the life of Teresa. For years it appeared that justice had been served. However, advances in forensic science would later reveal otherwise. In 2003, DNA testing conclusively proved that the men convicted were not responsible for her life being ended, leading to their exoneration and release. They sued for wrongful imprisonment, and 2 were each awarded $18 million. Despite renewed efforts, the case eventually went cold. The detectives continued to search for leads, interviewing potential witnesses and re-examining evidence, but no definitive suspect was ever identified. In early 2024, nearly 4 decades after Teresa's demise, the Nassau County investigators made the decision to reopen her case. With advances in modern forensic science, they saw an opportunity to revisit the evidence collected in 1984. Among the preserved materials was a swab recovered from the victim, which had never before undergone the level of DNA testing now possible. The sample was sent to RM. Specialists then used the sample to construct a detailed DNA profile of the unknown suspect. Once the genetic profile was built, it was turned over to the FBI's Investigative Genetic Genealogy Unit, which worked closely with the Nassau County investigators to search for potential relatives of the perpetrator. Through extensive analysis and family tree building, the investigation gradually narrowed to one name, Richard Beldo, a man quietly living in Long Island with no public connection to the decades-old crime. After identifying Below as a possible suspect, the investigators began discreet surveillance of his daily routine. They observed him over several days, looking for an opportunity to obtain a discarded DNA sample that could be tested against the genetic material from the 1984 crime scene. That chance came when Below threw away a smoothie cup. The detectives quickly recovered the item and forensic specialists extracted DNA from the straw, which was then analyzed in comparison to the profile derived from Teresa's case. The results left no room for doubt. Below's DNA matched the DNA recovered from the swab with complete certainty, a 100% match that conclusively tied him to the crime scene. In 1984, Below was a 23-year-old living with his grandparents in Lynbrook, a mile from Hot Skates, the roller rink where Teresa had worked. It was the breakthrough the investigators had waited nearly 40 years for. With the confirmation in hand, the authorities proceeded carefully, conducting additional verification tests and completing the necessary legal steps to ensure the case would stand in court. Following the confirmation, the detectives presented their findings to the district attorney's office, and an arrest warrant was swiftly authorized. The evidence was both scientifically sound and legally sufficient to proceed. This moment marked the culmination of years of dedication, persistence, and faith that the truth would eventually emerge. In October 2025, 63-year-old Richard Bello was arrested and formally charged with secondary slaying. When questioned by the police, he denied knowing Teresa. Nassau County District Attorney Ann Donnelly said through his denials that he had ever known her name, who she was. He made kind of a flippant comment about the 1980s. He said people got away with ending others' lives. Well, I'll tell you something, Mr. Beldo, I've got you now. He pleaded not guilty, but if convicted, he faces up to 25 years to life in prison. Teresa's father, Thomas Fusco, said, "I never gave up hope. I loved her and I miss her. She lives in my heart."